The night they threw Han Ji-woo out of her own tower. The guard checked a printout before he let go of her arm, and the signature on that printout was glued on crooked. That was the first thing I saw. Not the chairwoman of Seowon Group on her knees on wet marble, the bad paste job. I know how that sounds. There's a woman collapsing in the rain in front of 40 phones, and the auditor in me is squinting at a document from 6 meters away going, "That letter's kerning is wrong." That's a scan of an old contract signature cut and dropped onto a fresh confession. But that's the thing nobody tells you about spending 11 years reading fraud for a living. You stop seeing people first. You see the paper they're standing on, and whether it holds their weight, and hers didn't because somebody had built it to fold. Adrian Coe was doing the talking. Of course he was. He had the umbrella, the tailored grief, the voice pitched exactly one notch below a sob so the cameras would lean in. "We loved her," he told the press, and let that sit. "That's what makes this so hard. Seowon doesn't protect thieves. Not even ones I was going to marry. Nice." He even got the word marry in there, so the headline would write itself. "Fiancé betrayed." The crowd made that low, ugly sound crowds make when they've decided who the villain is, and they're relieved it isn't them. Somebody laughed. A guy in a good coat actually laughed, filming vertical. And I remember thinking, you're going to show that clip to people for years, and in about 10 weeks you're going to quietly delete it. Ji-woo didn't beg, I'll give her that. She knelt there with her hair flat to her skull and her blazer soaked through. And she looked at Adrian with an expression I couldn't read yet. An expression I'd spend the next 2 months learning, and she said one sentence, quiet, that the cameras mostly missed. "You'll want it back." Adrian smiled like she'd confessed. "You hear that?" he said to the reporters. "Even now," and she stopped talking. Just went still, the way the numbers on a frozen screen go still. Present but not updating. And the security detail hauled her upright and marched her down the steps like they were escorting a fire, not a person, and dumped her at the bottom where the tower's light didn't reach, and the rain did. I should tell you where I was standing because it matters to exactly none of them, and it's the whole story to me. I run a laundromat, a 24-hour laundromat with 4 booths of hot noodles and burnt coffee in the back, wedged under the Uedo Towers where the money is. Close enough that the analysts come down at 2 a.m. to wash the smell of their own panic out of their shirts. Reese called her 40 grand a year if the dryers behave. I'd come out to drag in the sandwich board before the wind took it, and instead I got a front row seat to a woman losing everything she had while the man who took it apologized to the internet. Here's where a nicer story has me rush over. I didn't rush. I went to grab my sign. I told myself she had lawyers, she had money, she had a whole tower of people whose job was her. I told myself the crooked signature wasn't my problem, because the last time a crooked signature was my problem, it cost me my license, my marriage, and 3 years of my life, and I'd built the entire back half of my 30s around never noticing paper again. I got the sign under my arm. I got 2 steps toward the door. Then I did the math I couldn't stop doing, which is the only math I've ever been good at. Guilty people get walked out quiet in the morning through the parking garage with a lawyer and an NDA. You don't stage the perp walk on the front steps at 9 at night in the rain, unless the point isn't the crime. The point was the crowd. Somebody wanted 40 phones to decide she was a thief before a single regulator read a single page. You don't burn a woman that publicly to punish her. You burn her that publicly to bury something, fast, under the noise. I know what it looks like when someone's building the noise. I helped build it once by refusing to, and I've been paying for the refusal ever since. So I put the sign back down. I walked across the plaza with my hood up, past the good coat guy still filming, and I took off my jacket, which is not a nice jacket, and I put it over the shoulders of the most powerful woman in that district while she sat in a puddle with nothing. She flinched like the fabric was a hand. Then she looked up at me, and up close the expression finally resolved. And it wasn't grief, and it wasn't fear. It was calculation. Even soaked and finished and dumped in the dark, some part of her was pricing me. Threat mark or nothing. "I can't pay you," she said. Flat, no shake in it. I didn't ask. Everyone asks. "I own a laundromat," I said. "You're dripping on my plaza. Consider it a customer service thing." Somewhere above us, the tower kept glowing its confident corporate blue, indifferent as a bank statement. And I helped Han Ji-woo up off the ground and walked her inside, into the steam and the fluorescent light and the smell of instant noodles. And I want to be honest with you, I did not do it because I'm kind. I did it because I recognized the shape of what had been done to her. It was the exact shape of the thing that had been done to me. And I had been waiting 3 years for it to walk past my door. I just didn't know yet that it would turn out to be worth more than the whole city. The back room of the laundromat is warm in a way the towers never are. Not nice warm. Dryer warm, thick and lint-smelling. The kind of heat that fogs the window until the neon outside melts into a smear. I sat her in the corner booth with her back to the wall, because I could already tell she was the type who needed to see the door. And Mrs. Bake came out from the kitchen without a word, and put down a bowl of soup and a spoon and went back to her drama on the little TV, like drowned. Billionaires wash up in her section every night. Ji-woo didn't touch the soup. She wrapped both hands around the bowl for the heat and watched me, and I could see her running the checklist. Who films this? Who did he sell the tip to? What's the angle? When's the ask? You're waiting for me to want something, I said, sitting across from her with my own coffee. You'll be waiting a while. It's boring. Drink the soup. People don't help strangers for nothing. People do, actually. They just don't do it in front of you because you're usually the reason they can't afford to. I said it plainly, no edge, and something in her face registered that I wasn't scared of her, which she filed away. Because women like her sort the whole world into people who are scared of them, and people who want to be them, and I just refused both jobs. She still didn't drink. So I stopped watching her and started folding towels, because I had towels. And because the fastest way to make a cornered person put down their guard is to become extremely boring furniture. Fold, stack, fold, stack. The machines hummed. Mrs. Bake's drama had a man crying about a will. After maybe 10 minutes, I heard the spoon move. I didn't look up. That was the deal. You knew who I was, she said eventually. Not a question. Everyone knows who you are today. You had a busy news cycle. You knew before the news cycle. She set the spoon down with a click. On the steps, you looked at the paper, not at me. You read it. Her eyes were doing the thing again, the pricing thing. Except now the number was climbing. Who reads a woman's execution and checks her signature, and there it was. Sharp, even gutted. Han Du-seuk's granddaughter, they'd called her in the profiles, raised at the founder's knee, a shark in a world of shark cosplayers. I'd assumed the ice was armor. Sitting across from it, I understood it wasn't armor. It was the actual animal. The rain had just knocked the suit off it. Somebody who used to read paper for a living, I said. Drink your soup, chairwoman. You've got no company, no accounts, and a fiancé about to be voted your replacement by morning. You're going to want the calories. She went quiet again, but it was a different quiet, not the frozen screen quiet from the steps. A working quiet. She ate the rest of the soup like it was a task on a list. Efficient, joyless, done. And then she said, I'm not going to thank you, and I said, God, please don't. And that was the closest thing to a truce either of us had felt in a while. I gave her the storeroom cot behind the detergent shelving. It's where I sleep when the night shift's dead, which is most nights, and I told myself I'd take the booth. I lay there in the front, listening to the dryers turn down one by one, and around 3 in the morning, when I got up to check the door, I heard her through the shelving. She was asleep, and she was saying a name over and over, low, the way you'd say it if you were somewhere trying to reach it. Jaewon, hold on. I didn't know who Jaewon was yet. I filed it. The way I file everything, in the part of me I'd spent 3 years trying to shut off, and I thought, whoever built her fall, they'll use that name. People like the ones who did this, they always find the soft thing, and they always press it. I made a note to find out who Jaewon was before they did. I was one day too slow on that. But I didn't know it yet either. By morning, she was a thief in 19 languages. Teo banged through the door at 7 like he always does, hauling a parts crate and the specific energy of a 17-year-old who has never once considered that the world might not be interested in him. He runs packages up and down the district on a scooter held together with zip ties and confidence. And he treats my laundromat like a base camp because I let him charge his phone and I don't tell him to leave. He clocked Ji-woo in the corner booth in about half a second. New night manager, he said, dropping the crate. She looks like she'd fire the coffee. She's a customer. Customers don't glare at the dryers like the dryers owe them money. He turned to her with the total fearlessness of a kid who has never opened a business page in his life. Good noodles or sad noodles? He gives strangers the sad noodles. Ji-woo looked at this child the way you'd look at a language you used to be able to speak. The good ones, she said. Tae grinned like he'd won a prize and went to go bully Mrs. Bake in the kitchen. And I watched Han Ji-woo's mouth do something at the corner. Small, almost nothing. The first movement I'd seen on that face that wasn't calculation. She caught me noticing and shut it down like a light switch. But I'd seen it. Filed it. There was a person somewhere under the ice, and a scooter kid had found her faster than her own board ever did. I watched the rest of it happen on my phone over the first pot of coffee, while Ji-woo watched over my shoulder with the specific stillness of a person seeing her own funeral get good engagement. Adrian had done the rounds overnight. Morning shows, a business channel, a tearful thread. He'd landed on a story, and the story was airtight in the way only a lie you've had months to rehearse can be. Han Ji-woo, drunk on her grandfather's legacy, had been quietly siphoning company funds through vendor contracts for years, and Adrian, loyal Adrian, Heartbroken Adrian had discovered it and done the hard, noble thing. 4.2 billion, he said on the business channel, and let the number hang there like a body. I keep asking myself how I didn't see it. I loved her. I think I didn't want to see it. He's good, I said, mostly to myself. He's had time, Jiwoo said, and her voice had gone somewhere cold and far. That's a 2-year build. The vendor shells, the board alignment. He had 2 years, and I let him hold my calendar. Then they brought on the friend. She came on the morning show with her mascara already artfully wrecked, introduced as Jiwoo's closest friend since university. A name I clocked and didn't like the smell of, Seo Chae-rin. She dabbed at her eyes and she said all the right terrible things. I don't want to believe it. I've known Jiwoo for 10 years, but the numbers, a little break in the voice. I keep looking at the numbers and I can't make them lie. Perfect. She'd defended the verdict by pretending to resist it, which is how you make a jury trust you, and she'd done it with the polish of a woman who'd practiced crying in a mirror. Behind me, Jiwoo made a sound, not a sob. A short, disbelieving exhale, like a machine registering an input it was built to consider impossible. Friend? I asked. Maid of honor, she said. She was going to be my maid of honor. She's angling for your seat and your fiancé in that order, I said. Watch. In about 3 weeks, she'll be photographed comforting Adrian somewhere expensive, and it'll be very tasteful and very accidental. Jiwoo looked at me. How do you know that? 'Cause that's the move. I scrolled. The board had done exactly what boards do. Emergency session at dawn, Adrian Ko named acting chairman. The market opening green on the news because nothing soothes shareholders like a thief in handcuffs and a handsome man promising order. Chairman Ko Sang-hyun, Adrian's uncle, had put out a statement about protecting the founder's vision. Seowon stock up 9% by 10 a.m. They'd killed her and gotten a bump for the funeral. I set the phone down and asked the question I'd been holding since 3 in the morning. Who's Jaewon? Her whole body did the frozen screen thing again, just for a beat. You were listening. You were loud. Who is he? No one you need. Flat, final, a door with a deadbolt. Everyone's got exactly one name they say in their sleep, I said. It's always the soft place. And the people who built this, they don't leave soft places alone. They lean on them. So I'll ask once more and then I'll drop it. But I'd rather find out from you than from them. Who is Jaewon? She looked at the table for a long moment. My brother, she said finally, giving me the least of it, the way you'd hand over a coin to make someone go away. Younger. He's sick. That's all you get. And then, sharper, rebuilding the wall in real time, don't defend me. She'd pulled back into the corner, arms crossed, watching her own erasure with a control I found, almost frightening. Whatever you're thinking. Everyone has already decided. Do you understand? It's over. The story is set. You can't unset a story once 19 countries have it. Everyone's decided, I agreed. Everyone's not me. She started to say something cutting. I held up a finger because I'd stopped listening to her. Because a name had gone by on the screen and my whole body had gone cold in a way that had nothing to do with the morning. In the leaked evidence, the board had handed the press to make the story stick. There was a vendor. One of the shells the money had supposedly flowed through. A logistics company, dormant, foreign registered, the kind of empty box you build to move dirty money and then dissolve. And it had a registration number. I knew that number. I'd seen that exact number 3 years ago in a different fraud. In a file that had ended my career the day I refused to sign my name under it. Reese? She said. It was the first time she'd used my name. I'd told her at some point. I don't remember when. Give me a second, I said, and my voice came out wrong, and she noticed, because she noticed everything. And for the first time since the steps, something in her went alert in a direction that wasn't about her own survival. You recognize something. I recognize everything, I said. That's the problem. That's always been the problem. Here's what I found out later happened that same afternoon. 40 floors up in the glass, while Jiwoo sat in my laundromat learning to be a dead woman. They were celebrating. Quietly, the way rich people celebrate, which is to say they ordered good coffee and pretended the mood was solemn. Adrian had the founder's chair now, Han Du-seok's chair, and he sat in it like it had always been measured for him. Chairman Ko Sang-hyun stood at the window with his hands behind his back, doing his statesman impression at the skyline. And Chae-rin was there, of course, no longer crying, perched on the arm of the good sofa, already dressed for the next act of her life. You were perfect this morning, Adrian told her. The break in the voice, the I can't make the numbers lie. I've had practice pretending to like her, Chae-rin said, and examined her nails. Sang-hyun didn't turn from the window. Is she handled? She's landfill, Adrian said. No accounts. No counsel that'll touch her. No story anyone will run except ours. She could stand in the lobby screaming the truth and security would card her. He put his feet on the founder's desk. By the time the regulators finish their nap, the shells are dissolved, the paper's shredded, and the only Han left in this building is the one on the plaque. That should have been the end of it. That was the whole design. Kill her loud, bury the machine under the noise, walk away clean. And it would have worked. It worked on me. It works 9 times out of 10, because who reads the pages? But Sang-hyun, the old man, the careful one, stood at that window a beat too long. The old man's estate, he said. His personal filings, all of it came to the company. All of it, Adrian said, not even looking up. Every share, every asset, all back inside Seowan where it belongs. The lawyers scrubbed it. There's nothing left in her name but her name, and we took that this morning. Good, Sang-hyun said. And here's the part I love, the part I'd give a year of my life to have watched in person. 3 of the sharpest predators in the district sat in that room, congratulating themselves on the cleanness of the kill, and not one of them had read the founder's personal filings past the first page. Not one of them knew that Han Du-seok, who trusted his board about as far as he could throw the tower, had spent the last 2 years of his life quietly moving the single most valuable thing he owned somewhere the company could never reach it. They'd swept the whole board clean and pocketed the pieces, and never once turned over the one square that mattered. They thought they'd taken everything. They'd taken the loud stuff. The old man had left the quiet stuff to her. But I didn't know any of that yet either. That night I still thought I was fighting to clear a name. That night, after I flipped the sign and the last analyst took his warm shirts home, I cleared the big folding table, and I laid her execution out on it. Page by page, the way I hadn't laid anything out in 3 years. She stood across from me with her arms crossed and watched a laundromat owner dissect the most sophisticated corporate frame in the country's recent memory with a highlighter and the back of a receipt roll. Sit down, I said. This takes a minute and you're making the table nervous. She sat, barely. Okay, here's what they gave the press. Follow the money, they said, and it looks bad because they built it to look bad. So let's actually follow it. I lined up the pages. Payment goes out here, the 14th, to the shell. Big number. Damning. I slid the next page over. Now here's the internal approval that supposedly authorized that payment. The thing with your signature on it, what's the date? She looked. Her jaw moved. The 19th. You approved the payment 5 days after the company made it. You're either the worst embezzler alive or a time traveler. Auditors call this a sequencing error. I call it somebody built the paper trail backward and got sloppy with the calendar because they never expected anyone to line the 2 pages up. Because who lines the 2 pages up? The regulator reads the summary, the press reads the tweet. Nobody reads the pages. I tapped it. I read the pages. That's the whole job. She was leaning in now. Cornered animal forgotten. Something else was driving. The vendors, I went on. 6 of them. Watch. I pulled the registrations. Same incorporation agent. Same registered address, which is a mail drop in a building that also houses 200 other companies. Sequential registration numbers, which means they were all born the same afternoon. Which is not how real vendors happen. Real vendors happen over years. Messy. With actual invoices for actual things. These have no history. They're stage sets. Someone stood up 6 cardboard companies, ran $4 billion through them on paper, and dissolved them before anyone could knock on the door. I know they're shells, she said, impatient. My lawyers said, your lawyers said it's suspicious. I'm telling you it's provable. There's a difference, and the difference is where you sleep for the next 15 years. I put the last page down. The confession, the one with the crooked signature that had started all of this on the steps. And this. Your signed admission, the document that made 40 phones sure. Look at your name, she looked. Now look at your name on this. I put down a real document beside it. A genuine old CO1 filing I'd pulled from the public registry an hour ago, her actual signature. And I put them side by side under the fluorescent light. The W in Ji-woo, on the real one it's got a little break. A hitch where your pen lifts. On the confession, it's got the exact same hitch, identical pixel for pixel. Human beings cannot sign their name the same way twice. That's the entire reason signatures work. This isn't your signature? It's a photograph of your signature, cut out of that filing and pasted onto their confession. Whoever did it didn't even bother to fake the pen. They just glued yours on. The room was very quiet except for the machines. 10 minutes, Ji-woo said. Her voice had changed. My legal team had the same documents for a week. You did this in 10 minutes. They weren't looking, they were managing you. There's a difference. I capped the highlighter. Also, they were being paid by people who wanted the frame to hold. Never underestimate how much analysis dies the second someone's salary depends on not doing it. She stared at the 2 signatures side by side on the folding table, in a laundromat, at midnight, and I watched the thing I'd seen on the steps finally crack all the way open. Not gratitude. Gratitude I could have handled. This was worse. This was fear aimed at me, clean and specific. "Who are you?" she said. Not "who are you" like "tell me your name." Who are you like "what are you?" How does the man who saved me from the rain also happen to be the one person on Earth who can read the exact fingerprint of the machine that killed me? And that's the question, isn't it? That's the question I'd been not answering for 3 years, to my landlord, to the analysts, to the mirror. Later I said, no, now. Because a coincidence this size isn't a coincidence, it's a plan I'm not in on yet, and I've had my fill of those. She'd found her spine somewhere in the last 10 minutes, dug it out of the wet marble, and she leveled it at me across the towels. "You didn't stumble on me. You've seen this before? That number you went white over? Talk fair." She'd earned it, and I'd have wanted the same, so I stopped folding, and I told her. 3 years ago, I was the best forensic auditor in the country, and I say that without pride because it turned out to be the least useful sentence anyone ever put on my resume. I got hired to certify a subcontractor's books ahead of a big Seowan acquisition. Routine, sign here, everyone gets paid, the deal closes. Except the books didn't close. I found a hole. And the hole had a shape, and the shape was money leaving through vendors that didn't exist and coming back clean somewhere. I wasn't allowed to look. I pulled the thread. The thread went up. It kept going up, and one afternoon a man named Ko Sang-hyun invited me to a very good lunch and explained, gently, over a fish I couldn't afford, that some audits are better left as art than science, and that a man's signature is his whole future, and I should be careful where I put mine. I didn't sign. I still think it was the right call. I also think right calls are the most expensive things a person can buy. 2 weeks later, there was a leak. Confidential client data, traced to me, with my access logs to prove it. Logs I now know were as real as her confession. My license was pulled. The firm cut me loose within the hour, because the firm's salary also depended on not looking. There was a small, tasteful news item. My wife read it before I could explain it, and decided the tasteful version was easier to be married to than me. I lost the license, the work, the marriage, and the ability to walk into any building in that district as anything but a ghost, all in about 9 days. All because I read the pages, so I stopped. I bought a laundromat with the last of the settlement they gave me to go away quietly, and I made myself into the most boring man in Yoido. And I kept exactly one thing from the old life. I got up, and I moved the industrial shelf, and I pried up the floor panel under it, and I lifted out the box. Jiwoo watched me set it on the table. Cheap document box, taped 3 years of dust in the seams. Originals, I said. Everything I pulled before they locked me out. The real vendor registrations. The access logs before they were doctored, with the timestamps that proved the doctoring. The lunch, which I recorded, because I was already scared, and being scared makes you thorough. 3 years I've been sitting on the one thing that proves Ko Sang-hyun runs a fraud machine, and I've done nothing with it. Because the last time I moved against these people, they erased me. And a ghost with a box has no leverage and no license, and nothing to lose except the box. "Why keep it then?" she said quietly. "Because I'm patient and I don't forgive. And I always figured that one day the machine would run again, and I'd need the schematic. I tapped the confession, the glued signature, and then I tapped the box. It's running again. Same agent, same shell structure, same crooked hand. They used the identical playbook on you that they used to bury me because it worked. And people who get away with a thing stop improving it. Your fall and my fall came off the same press." She sat with that. She was smart enough to see all of it at once. The size of it, the way it fit together, and smart enough to see the other thing too. The thing I hadn't said. "You didn't put me in your jacket out of kindness," she said. "No. You put me in your jacket because I'm a lever. You're the first crack I've seen in 3 years," I said. "You're inside their machine. You're already dead in the eyes of everyone who matters, which means you've got nothing left to protect. Which makes you exactly as dangerous as I am. Alone, I'm a ghost with a box. You and me, we're two people the same machine tried to delete and didn't finish. That's not kindness. That's arithmetic. I'm very good at arithmetic." I expected her to be insulted. I'd braced for the ice. Instead, she looked at me for a long moment across the folding table, across the 2 versions of her own name, and something in her did the coldest. "Most Seowan thing I'd seen yet," she recalculated. She took "I'm being used" and she turned it over and priced it and put it down on the profit side. Because a woman who trusts no one finds an honest lever far more trustworthy than a warm hand. And I'd just handed her an honest lever. "Why should I trust you?" she said. But it wasn't a wall this time. It was a term sheet. "You shouldn't," I said. "Don't trust me. We don't need trust. We need one thing to be true, and it is, we have the same enemy, and I count better than they do. I pushed the box an inch toward her. They took everything I had and made me nothing. Fine. They also stopped watching nothing, because who watches a laundromat? You want to know the one advantage a ghost has, chairwoman? She waited. Nobody's guarding the door, I'm already inside. She was quiet for a while, and I could hear her building something behind her eyes. The way the machines in front of me built heat. When she spoke again, the voice had changed. The wet marble version of Han Ji-woo was gone. What sat across from me now was the one the profiles had been scared of. Then we don't clear my name, she said. We don't. Clearing my name is small. Clearing my name gets me a correction on page 9 and a settlement I'll spend the rest of my life explaining. No. She put one finger on my dusty box, then one finger on the glued signature, and slid them together like she was closing a deal. Your box proves the machine. My fall proves it's still running. We don't defend. We take it public, all of it, at a moment they can't spin, in a room they can't clear. And I don't walk out with an apology. I walk out with the tower. I looked at her. You've been ruined for 36 hours and you're already planning the acquisition. My grandfather taught me one thing worth keeping, she said. Never negotiate to survive, negotiate to own the table. A pause. He also didn't trust the board, not one of them. He used to say it in front of me like a joke and mean it like a will. I didn't understand why until this week. That landed somewhere in me and stuck. A founder who didn't trust his own board, who said so like a will. I didn't have the shape of it yet. I just knew that a man that careful doesn't get robbed of everything in one clean sweep, unless he wanted the sweep to find nothing. Is there anyone left? I asked. Anyone from before Adrian. Anyone who was your grandfather's and never became the board's. She thought about it. And for the first time, something crossed her face that wasn't ice or calculation. It was almost hope, and she hated it. I could tell she hated it. There was a driver, she said slowly. My grandfather's old ma. 30 years. He carried the man to the hospital the night he died. They pushed him out with a watch and a handshake the week after the funeral. She frowned. He tried to reach me, twice before all this. I was too busy running a company I didn't know I'd already lost. I never called him back. Call him back, I said. I don't have a phone, I don't have anything. I slid mine across the towels, across the 2 versions of her name, across 3 years of dust. Then start with mine, I said. That's the whole trick, chairwoman. You start with what the ghost has, because the ghost is the only one they stopped counting. She looked at the phone. She looked at me. And Han Ji-woo, worth nothing, wanted by no one, thief in 19 languages, picked it up and began, very quietly, to build her way back into the building. Outside, the tower kept glowing its blue, sure of itself, telling the district a clean story about order restored and thieves punished. Inside my laundromat, 2 erased people looked at a box on a folding table. And neither of us knew yet that somewhere in the paperwork her grandfather had left behind was a single line in a single account. That would make everything on that table look like the pocket change it was. We thought we were fighting for her name. We hadn't even found the trillion yet. Old Ma came the next night, and he came the way old men come to hard things, dressed for it. He'd put on a suit. It was 15 years out of fashion and pressed so hard the creases could have cut bread. And he stood in the doorway of my laundromat with a hat in both hands like he'd walked into a chapel by mistake. 70, maybe more. A driver's build, all shoulders gone soft, hands that had held a wheel for 30 years and didn't know what to do now that there was nothing to steer. He saw Ji-woo in the corner booth and his whole face came apart. Agassi, he said. Young miss. And then he couldn't say anything else because he was crying. This enormous, careful old man crying without any sound at all, which is the worst kind. And Ji-woo stood up from the booth, and for 1 second I watched the chairwoman try to hold her posture and lose. You called me back, he said when he could. 3 days. I thought I saw the news. I thought, I'm sorry, Ji-woo said. And I want you to understand what that cost her, because in the 2 days I'd known her, I'd watched this woman take a public execution without flinching. And here she was undone by a driver in a bad suit. You reached out. Twice before I didn't call back. I was running his company, and I thought that was the same as honoring him, and it wasn't. You're honoring him now, Old Ma said. That's why I'm here. That's the whole reason I'm here. He wiped his face with the flat of his hand, embarrassed, and looked around my laundromat, the dryers, the noodle booths, the neon smear on the fogged glass, and then he looked at me. And a driver's eyes are a specialist instrument. 30 years of reading who gets in the back seat, and he read me in about a second and a half. You're the one who took her in. I own the noodles, I said. It came with the building. He almost smiled. Then he set the hat down on my folding table, very deliberately. And from inside his jacket, he took out an envelope, and the whole room changed temperature. It was yellowed at the edges, sealed with actual wax, an old man's affectation. The kind of thing you do when you want the person opening it to know you meant it. Across the front, in a hard old-fashioned hand. For Ji-woo, to be opened on the day they all turn on you. Grandfather. Ji-woo went completely still. When did he give you this? 2 years ago, old Ma said. The spring before he got sick. He called me to the house. No driver's cap. Sat me down like a friend, which he'd never once done in 30 years. He gave me this and he said, Ma, you're the only one in this building nobody bothers to lie to, because nobody thinks you're listening. Keep this. Don't give it to her when I die. Give it to her the day they all leave her standing in the rain. Old Ma's jaw worked. I thought he was being dramatic. He got that way at the end. Everyone said so, said the old man's mind was going soft. It wasn't going soft. He'd done the math on his own board, and he'd come out with a number he didn't like. The day they all leave her standing in the rain. I'd found her on wet marble. The old man had called the weather 2 years out. Open it, I said. Ji-woo broke the wax. Inside there was a single sheet of paper, folded once, and a small flat key on a paper tag. The kind a bank gives you for a safe deposit box. She read the letter standing up, and her face did nothing, which by now I understood was the most it ever did when something was hitting hard. Then she put it on the table and slid it toward me, because in 2 days we'd become the kind of partners who slide the page across, and I read it too. It was short. The old man didn't waste words even from the grave. Ji-woo, if you're reading this, they've done it, and I'm sorry I couldn't stop it from where I'm going. Listen to me now the way you never did at the dinner table. They will take the loud things. The tower, the shares, the name on the door. Let them. It was always the loud things they wanted, and loud things are heavy and easy to steal. I left you the quiet thing. It's in the box this key opens. It's worth more than everything they're carrying out the front door, and they will never think to look for it, because they don't read past the first page. They never did. That was always how I stayed ahead of them, and now it's how you will. One more thing, and do this before anything else. Find the auditor they were afraid of. There was one. They spent a great deal of money to make him disappear, which is how I knew he was the one worth finding. Find him. He's the only man in this city who reads the pages. HD. The laundromat was very quiet. Even the machines seemed to be listening. Ji-woo looked up from the letter, and she looked at me, the laundromat owner, the ghost, the man who reads the pages the auditor a great deal of money had made disappear. He was looking for you, she said, before he died. My grandfather was looking for you, specifically, and he ran out of time. A lot of people ran out of time on this, I said. And my voice wasn't as steady as I wanted it. Because here's the thing about being erased. You spend 3 years telling yourself it meant nothing, that you were a line item somebody deleted and the world closed over the gap. And then a dead man reaches out of an envelope and tells you that you were the one thing he was hunting for, the piece that could have saved his granddaughter, and that he died a few steps short of finding you. I'd been sitting in a laundromat 2 miles from his office the whole time, reading no pages. On purpose. Old Ma watched the two of us with the patience of a man who'd waited 2 years to deliver a letter and could wait a little longer. The box is at the Myeongdong branch, he said. He kept it under a name that isn't Han. I have the name. He gave me that too. Of course he did, I said. He said, old Ma added, carefully, like he was handing over something fragile, that whatever was in it, the clock had already started. He said, tell her the clock started the day I died. He was very clear about that part. He made me repeat it. I looked at Ji-woo. When did he die? 51 days ago, she said. I didn't know yet what the clock was counting down to, but I knew the shape of a man who structures his whole revenge around a deadline because I was one. And I knew that 51 days into anything is usually further than you want to be. Then we go to the bank in the morning, I said, the second it opens. The box was long and shallow and heavier than it looked. And when the clerk left us alone in the little viewing room with its bad carpet and its one buzzing light, Ji-woo lifted the lid, and we both looked in expecting gold or bearer bonds or the theatrical kind of wealth. And instead there was a folder. One folder. Government gray, with a seal embossed in the corner, and a stamp, and a lot of very dry language. And I lifted it out and read the header, and I sat down in the plastic chair, which I hadn't planned to do. My legs just made the decision without me. Reese, Ji-woo's voice had an edge I hadn't heard yet. Fear that something was wrong. What? What is it? Concession number 7, I said. Which is what? I read it twice more to be sure. Because a document this size, you don't trust your first read, you don't trust your second. Then I set it down on the bad carpet between us and I explained the quiet thing her grandfather had left her. And I watched a woman who thought she'd lost everything find out she was holding the most valuable single object in the country. You know the metal in your phone, I said. In every phone, every electric car, every wind turbine, every missile guidance system on Earth. The rare earths. The whole modern world runs on maybe 17 elements. Nobody can pronounce. And the entire planet has been quietly panicking for a decade because almost all of the refining, the part where you turn the dirty ore into the pure usable thing, happens in about 3 places. And everyone with a strategic bone in their body has been desperate to build the capacity somewhere else. I tapped the folder. Your grandfather saw it coming 15 years early, the way he saw everything. There's a stretch of coast up at Sokcho, old industrial land, worthless looking. The kind of gray nothing you'd drive past. He spent 2 decades and a fortune securing one thing on it. An exclusive state license to refine rare earths there. Exclusive, meaning for the next 40 years, legally, nobody else in the country can do it at scale. Every gram has to come through that site. Jiwoo was very still. The company owns that. That's the beautiful part. The company doesn't. I found the clause and turned it so she could see. He held it personally in his own name then. 2 years ago, he moved it. Watch whose name it's in now. She looked. Han Ji-woo. It's not on Seowon's balance sheet, I said. It never was. It's a personal asset granted to a private individual sitting outside the corporation entirely. Which is exactly why when the board swept the company clean and pocketed every share and every subsidiary, they got the whole loud empire and they missed this. Because this was never in the empire. It was in a bank box in Myeongdong under a name that isn't Han. I sat back. They threw you in the gutter and left the crown in your pocket because they never once turned it over to check. What is it worth? She said. Quiet. Careful. A woman who'd learned that week not to hope. On the ore throughput alone, over the life of the license, against where the market's going. I did the arithmetic I'm good at. Out loud, slow, so she'd believe it. Conservatively. North of 3 trillion. The buzzing light buzzed. Somewhere out in the bank, a printer ran. Dollars? She said. Dollars. Han Ji-woo sitting on the bad carpet of a bank viewing room in borrowed clothes. Worth nothing 48 hours ago. Thief in 19 languages. Put her hand flat on the folder that made her one of the wealthiest human beings alive and did not smile. That's the thing I keep coming back to about her. She didn't smile. She got quieter and colder, and I could see her doing the thing her grandfather taught her, pricing it, weighing it, and finding the trap inside the gift. Because there's always a trap. The old man had said the clock had started. There's a catch, she said. He said the clock started the day he died. Find the catch. So I found the catch. It took me 4 minutes, and it's the 4 minutes the whole rest of this story hangs on. Activation, I said. A license like this isn't a painting you hang on the wall. It's a right you have to exercise. There's a clause. The holder has to formally activate and re-register the concession, in person, before the state authority, within 90 days of the grantor's death. I looked up at her. That's the clock. He died 51 days ago. You have 39 days to stand in front of the ministry and claim it in your own name. And if I don't, it lapses, reverts to the state. And a lapsed concession this valuable doesn't just sit there, it goes to a public retender, an auction of the license open to qualified bidders. I felt the whole thing click into its final ugly shape as I said it. And who do you think has spent the last 2 years quietly building a subsidiary position to be the qualified bidder the second this comes up for tender? Her eyes closed. Adrian, the board. Adrian's the face. They may not even know the license exists yet. That's our one piece of luck, but they built the vehicle to catch it if it ever fell. Because that's what predators do. They stand under the tree with their mouths open just in case. If your clock runs out, the crown falls straight into the machine that's already running. I gathered the folder up off the carpet. So here's the board. Chairwoman, the whole board, all at once. To activate the license and keep $3 trillion, you have to stand in front of the state in 39 days as a person in good standing. But right now, you're a person under criminal indictment for a $4 billion fraud, so you can't stand in front of anything but a judge. Which means before you can claim the quiet thing, you have to clear the loud thing. You have to break their frame, publicly, provably, in less than 39 days, or the trillion evaporates and lands in their hands and they win twice. She opened her eyes. One cures the other, she said slowly. I clear my name to get the license. I use the license to take the tower. Now you sound like your grandfather. He'd have hated this plan, she said. Too much depending on a stranger who reads pages. A pause and then dry. The first genuinely dry thing she'd said. A spark of the person under the ice. He'd have hated you specifically. You own noodles. He was looking for me, I reminded her. That's why he'd have hated you, she said. Nobody likes needing the thing they can't control. She stood, and she took the folder from my hands and she held it against her chest the way old Ma had held his hat. And something had shifted in her. Some final gear had engaged. 39 days. 39 days. We walked out of that bank, two people who'd come in holding nothing and left holding the most dangerous object in the city. And nobody on the street looked at us twice because that's the whole trick. And the clock was already running. You don't take a machine like theirs apart by kicking it. You take it apart one screw at a time, quietly from underneath, and you make sure that when it finally comes down, it looks like it did it to itself. I made the first move the next morning, and it was the smallest possible move, which is why it worked. 3 years of being a ghost, I'd kept exactly one bridge unburned. Back when I still had the license, there was a young investigator at the Financial Supervisory Service named Pak Seo-jin, and during the mess that ended me, everyone with a badge got leaned on to sign a statement that I was dirty, and she was the only one who read my actual file before she refused. It cost her a promotion. We'd never spoken since. Some debts you don't cash, you just leave them on the table where both people can see them. I cashed it. I didn't call. Ghosts don't call. I mailed her one thing, on paper, no return address, no note, a single vendor registration from the evidence the board leaked to the press. Sitting next to a single registration from my own box. 3 years old from the fraud that killed me. Same incorporation agent. Same mail drop address. Consecutive numbers born the same afternoon. I circled nothing. I explained nothing. I trusted her to read the pages because she was the other person in this city who did. Then I sat in my laundromat and waited for a very small stone to make a very large pond nervous. Meanwhile, Ji-woo made her own move, and hers was braver than mine because hers had a face attached. There was a woman named Yuna Song who'd been Ji-woo's executive assistant for 4 years and got demoted to the filing basement the week Adrian took over. The standard purge. Sweep out anyone loyal to the old regime. Yuna could have kept her head down. Most people keep their head down. That's why machines like this run. They're built out of 1,000 people keeping their heads down. Ji-woo called her from my phone and asked her to do one dangerous thing. And Yuna, God bless the small brave people of this world, said yes before Ji-woo finished the sentence. The original contract, the real one, the genuine old Seowan filing that the board had cut Ji-woo's signature out of to paste onto the fake confession. It was still in the physical archive because the board had scrubbed the digital copies, but nobody scrubs the basement. Nobody thinks about the basement. The basement is where they'd put Yuna. 2 days later, a courier dropped a padded envelope at my laundromat. Tay brought it to the back with his eyebrows up. This lady in the basement looked like she was smuggling a kidney, he reported. You people are doing crimes. I want in. I get so bored. You're already in, I said. You just delivered evidence in a national fraud case? Congratulations. Don't tell anyone, or we all go to prison. Tay's whole face lit up like I'd promoted him. Sick, he breathed, and went to guard the door with the seriousness of a Secret Service agent guarding a folding table. Inside the envelope was the original, and there it was, plain as a fingerprint. Ji-woo's real signature, with the chipped letter, the exact chip that showed up pasted onto their fake. Proof you could hold in your hand that the confession was assembled with scissors. Yuna had signed nothing, touched nothing digital, left no trace but a gap on a basement shelf nobody would notice for months. The stones were in the pond. Now I watched the ripples. They reached the CFO first, which is always how it goes, because the CFO is the one who has to sign his own name to things. Here's what happened up in the glass, which I reconstructed later, partly from Yuna, partly from Pak Seo-jin. Mostly from the fact that panic leaves a very clear paper trail if you know how to read it. Pak's quiet query landed on a desk at the supervisory service, a formal request for records on one dissolved vendor, routine on its face. But a formal query with a case number attached is a different animal than a journalist's phone call, because a formal query becomes part of a file. Files don't go away when the news cycle does, and Yoon Jae-hyuk, the CFO, the man whose signature was on the wire transfers, understood that better than anyone. He was the one who'd have to explain the paper. He was the one the whole scheme balanced on financially, and he knew it. And the day that query landed, he stopped sleeping. Adrian, when Yoon brought it to him, waved it off. I'd have bet money he would. Men like Adrian don't fear the query, they fear the crowd. And there was no crowd, so there was nothing to fear. It's a formality, he told Yoon, in the founder's chair. With his feet on the founder's desk. One dead shell. Let them chase it. By the time they've filed the paperwork to look at a company that no longer exists, will be a year past all of this. He'd smiled, apparently. Relax. Dead women don't file complaints. But Yoon didn't relax. Yoon went back down to his office, and he pulled the vendor file himself, quietly, to see how exposed he was. And what he found was that one of the shells had a loose thread he'd never cleaned, and he started, very quietly, to pull it to protect himself, which is the exact behavior you want from the weakest screw in a machine. You don't have to break it, you just have to make it start unscrewing itself. I told Ji-woo that night, at the folding table. The CFO's scared. He's covering his own exit now, instead of the company's. When the pressure comes, he'll be the first to turn, because he's the one who signed. Good, she said. And then, because she was learning to think 3 moves out the way I did, she frowned. But quiet won't finish it. A dissolved shell, a scared accountant, a query in a drawer. That clears my name in a courtroom in 2 years. I don't have 2 years. I have 36 days and a license that has to be claimed in front of the state, in public, in a room full of the very people I'm trying to bury. No, I agreed. Quiet won't finish it. Quiet is how we load the gun. But the trigger has to be public, because the clock forces us into public, because you can't claim the crown in a whisper. I looked at the calendar I'd started keeping on the back of a receipt roll, the days ticking down. So we don't hide from the set piece. We build one. We get every one of them, Adrian, the chairman, the board, the friend, into a single room on a single day, with the cameras already rolling. And we make the whole thing come down at once, in front of the only crowd that can't be managed. The activation ceremony, Ji-woo said slowly. The state re-registration. It's public. Regulators press. The ministry does it in the tower's own hall, because Seowan's the host of the tender. They'll all be there, I said. Adrian thinks it's his coronation. He'll stand up there certain the license is about to fall into his lap. I felt the shape of it lock in, cold and clean, and 36 days away. We don't stop the ceremony. We walk into it. She looked at the receipt roll calendar, at the days I'd crossed off, and for a second the enormity of it sat on the table between us. One laundromat owner and one dead chairwoman planning to walk into the enemy's own hall and take $3 trillion off the table in front of the cameras. He'd have loved this part, she said quietly. Not Adrian, the old man. This is the part he'd have loved. She started eating somewhere in there. That's how I knew it was working, not the plan, her. The first few nights she'd treated Mrs. Bake's soup like a task on a list. Fuel, joyless, done. Then one night, about a week in, I looked up from the calendar, and she'd finished the whole bowl and was holding it for the warmth the way she had that first night in the rain. Except this time her shoulders had come down from around her ears, and Mrs. Bake, who never says anything, came out and refilled it without being asked. And Ji-woo said thank you in a voice that had a person in it. You're staring, Ji-woo said, not looking up. You're eating. It's novel, like watching a statue take up a hobby. She almost smiled. Almost. My grandfather had a rule. Never let them see you eat. Never let them see you tired. Never let them see you want anything. He said the second a shark smells that you need something, you're the meal. She turned the bowl in her hands. I ran a company for 6 years and I never once ate in front of the board. I thought it made me strong. It made me alone. There's a difference. I'm only learning the difference in a laundromat, which is humiliating. The noodles are good, though. The noodles are very good, she admitted, like it hurt. That was the closest we'd come to warm, and I'd have let it sit there, except she set the bowl down, and her face changed, and I watched the ice come back. Not the armor kind, the frightened kind, and I understood she was about to tell me the soft thing. The name in the dark. I have to tell you about Jaewon, she said. Because it's a hole in the plan and you find holes, her brother. Younger by 9 years, she said. An accident of their parents' late second try, and their parents were gone car when he was 6, so she'd raised him more than anyone had. He'd been sick most of his life, some long, ugly word for a body that fights itself, the kind of illness that isn't a story with an ending. Just a cost that comes due every month forever. A private clinic. Specialists' treatment that worked mostly as long as it never stopped. And all of it, every one of it, ran through Ji-woo's personal accounts, because she'd never wanted him inside the company's insurance where the board could see the leverage and price it. They're frozen, she said. My personal accounts. The indictment froze everything. I found out this morning, Yuna checked for me. Her voice was doing the flat thing, the hardest hit thing. The clinic runs on autopay from an account that has a legal hold on it. The next cycle is in 4 days. When it doesn't clear, they'll do what clinics do. They'll be very sorry and very professional, and they'll move him to a public ward and take him off the specialist protocol, and he'll be alive. He'll be alive. But the thing that's been holding the line for 9 years will just stop. She looked at me, and there it was. The whole ice queen with the floor gone out from under her. I have $3 trillion in a folder I can't touch for 35 more days, and I can't make one clinic payment for my brother. That's the joke. That's the actual joke. I didn't say anything comforting. She'd have hated comforting, and anyway, I don't have any. What I did was get up and go to the register and take out the cash drawer, all of it. The night's noodle money and the coin roll and the emergency envelope I keep taped under the till for when a dryer dies, and I counted it on the folding table. It wasn't $3 trillion. It was about 2 months of a laundromat. How much is one cycle, I said. She told me. It was more than the drawer. It was close. Tay, I called. Tay stuck his head in from the front, alert as a fire alarm. The jar, the scooter jar. That's my scooter jar, Tay said. I'll pay you back double when we're rich. Are we going to be rich? Statistically, it's about even odds we go to prison instead, I said. The jar. Tay looked at Jiwoo, at whatever was on her face, and he stopped being a kid for 1 second. And he went and got the jar, his scooter repair fund, months of it, and he set it on the table next to the register drawer without a word. And then Mrs. Beck, who'd been listening the way she listens to everything, came out of the kitchen and put down a fold of bills that she keeps in her apron for reasons she's never explained. And she said the only full sentence I'd heard her say in 2 years. Sick children come first, she said, and went back to her drama. We were short by a little. I covered the little from the part of the settlement money I'd sworn never to touch, the 3 years untouched screw you money. And I made the clinic payment that night, from a laundromat, for the brother of a woman who could have bought the clinic, the hospital, and the street it stood on, if the calendar had just moved 35 squares. Jiwoo watched the confirmation come through on my phone. She didn't cry. I'd have been alarmed if she cried. That's not the machine she is. She went very still, and then she said, in a voice stripped all the way down, you have $40,000 a year, and you just emptied your entire life for a stranger's brother. He's not a stranger. He's leverage they were about to use on you, and I got to it first. I put the phone down. You're an asset, chairwoman. Assets have vulnerabilities. I closed one. This is called protecting the investment. She looked at me for a long moment across the empty register drawer and the scooter jar and Mrs. Beck's apron money. All the small, brave money of small, brave people, spent on a boy none of them had met. That's not why you did it, she said. No, I admitted. But it's true anyway. Both things are true. And Han Ji-woo, who trusted no one, who'd been taught by the smartest man she knew that the second a shark smells you need something near the meal, looked at a laundromat full of people who'd just smelled her need and, instead of eating her, emptied their jars, and something in her that had been frozen since long before the rain finally cracked all the way through. Not gratitude. I keep telling you it was never gratitude. It was recognition. She'd found the one thing her grandfather's rule couldn't account for. People who help you when helping you costs them and buys them nothing. Okay, she said, very quietly. And it wasn't okay about the money. It was okay about me. A door, unbolting. I'd have said something and ruined it. I'm good at that. But I didn't get the chance, because Tay, back at the front window with his empty jar, said, in a completely different voice, a small one, Reese, there's a car. I went to the front. Across the street, in the loading zone where nobody parks, a black sedan sat with its engine running and its lights off, tinted. Idling. The kind of car that costs more than my building. It had been there, Tay said, since about the time old Ma left the day before, and it had come back tonight, and it wasn't waiting for anyone. Because nobody had come out and nobody had gone in. It was just sitting there with its engine on, pointed at my door. Somebody had found the laundromat. Somebody had smelled the ghost. I found out how, and I found out who, and it was worse than a tale. It was worse than a fixer. It was the most dangerous kind of discovery, the accidental kind. The kind nobody planned and nobody can call off. It was Chae-rin. She hadn't been sent. That's what made it lethal. If Adrian had sent a professional, the professional would have reported up a clean chain, and I'd have known the shape of what was coming. But Chae-rin came on her own, driven by the one thing more reliable than orders, which is a guilty person's need to make sure the body stays buried. She'd spent 10 years pretending to be Jiwoo's friend, and now she'd taken Jiwoo's fiancé and was 3 tasteful weeks from taking Jiwoo's chair. And a woman that far into a lie can't sleep until she's certain the person she betrayed is really truly finished. So she'd gone looking, traced old Ma's little pension car on a hunch. Because Chae-rin was many bad things, but she wasn't stupid. And old Ma had led her, without ever knowing, straight to a laundromat in Yoido. She sat in that sedan across the street and she watched. And on the second night, she watched me spread paper across the folding table under the front window, and she got out of the car in the rain with her phone. And she came close enough to the fogged glass to shoot through the one clear patch the heat hadn't reached, and she photographed the table. She didn't get much. A ghost is careful, and I had the license folder mostly closed. But a corner showed, a government seal and part of a header, and 3 words that meant nothing to a woman like Chae-rin, whose entire genius was social and 0% technical. Rare earths. Sokcho. Concession. She almost deleted it. She told Adrian later she almost deleted it. That she'd only kept it because it looked official, and she thought maybe Jiwoo was cooking up some countersuit, and Adrian should see the letterhead. She had no idea what she'd photographed. She thought she was bringing him a threat. She was bringing him $3 trillion he didn't know existed. I'd have given a great deal to see his face when the picture loaded. I have to imagine it, and I've imagined it a lot because it's the moment the whole board tilted. Adrian in the founder's chair taking the phone from Chae-rin with a bored hand expecting a lawyer's letterhead, and instead reading the word concession next to the word sokcho, and going very slowly, very completely still. He'd have known. That's the part. Adrian wasn't stupid either, and he'd spent 2 years building a subsidiary positioned for exactly one kind of asset. And here was a government seal with the word rare earths on it, in the hand of the woman they'd thrown away. And he'd have felt the floor move. He went to the founder's personal filings that night. The ones the lawyers had scrubbed. The ones nobody, not Adrian, not the chairman, not one of the sharpest predators in the district, had ever read past the first page, because who reads the pages? And on page 19, or wherever the old man had buried it, in the driest possible language, he found it. A personal, exclusive, state-granted rare earth refining concession on the Sokcho coast, held outside the company, outside their sweep, outside everything they'd stolen, in a single name. Han Ji-woo, the woman he'd framed, the woman he'd dumped in the rain and toasted with good coffee, the landfill. She'd been carrying $3 trillion in her own name the entire time, and he'd handed her the one thing that could destroy him and called it mercy, because he'd let her live. Here's what I reconstructed of that room later, from the shape of what they did next, because their panic left prints too. Adrian didn't yell. Sang-hyun was there by then, summoned, and Sang-hyun never yells, and Adrian was learning to be Sang-hyun. He sat with the filing and he did the recalculation fast, the way you do when the whole board just flipped, and the recalculation came out ugly and simple. Dead women don't file complaints. But a dead woman holding a live license isn't dead. She's the single richest person in the tender. And she's got 30-some days to walk into a public ceremony and claim a crown that makes the whole stolen empire look like the coat check. She can't know she has it. Adrian would have said, hoping. She's been ruined for 2 weeks. She's hiding in a laundromat. She's not hiding in a laundromat, the chairman would have said. Because Sang-hyun was the careful one, Sang-hyun had done a great deal of money once to make a certain auditor disappear. And Sang-hyun would have been the first to feel the cold breath on the back of his neck. Whose laundromat? They'd have run the ghost, it wouldn't have taken long. And when the name came back, when they learned that the woman they framed was sitting in the back room of the one auditor Sang-hyun had personally erased. The one man in the city who reads the pages, the man the founder died looking for, I imagine the good coffee stopped tasting like anything at all. But that came a night later. That night, they only knew one thing, and it changed everything, and it flipped the whole machine from one setting to another with an almost audible click. For 2 weeks, their entire strategy had been ignore her. She's finished. She's landfill. Now it became something else. Something with a deadline that matched ours exactly, because the same clock was ticking for both sides. Now, get her signature. Before the ceremony. Any way it takes. Because a lapsed license goes to a messy public tender they might lose. But a signature, freely given or otherwise, a clean transfer of the concession from her hand to theirs, that ends it forever, quiet, total, and legal on its face. They didn't need her dead anymore. They needed her holding a pen. And so for the first time in 2 weeks, Adrian Ko picked up the phone and called the woman he'd destroyed. We were still at the folding table when it rang. My phone, the one Ji-woo had been using, the one that had made the clinic payment an hour before. An unknown number. She looked at it, then at me, and I nodded, and she answered on speaker, because we'd stopped having separate conversations days ago, and Adrian's voice came into my laundromat, warm as a bath, smooth as a closing statement, the voice of a man who'd loved her on morning television. Ji-woo-ya, the old pet name, the little softening at the end. Thank God, I've been going out of my mind trying to find you, a perfect practice breath. Listen to me. I know they set you up. I've known for days, and I've been fighting them from the inside, I swear to you. And I finally have a way to fix all of it. To give you your name back, everything. But we have to move fast, and we have to do it together. The smile came right down the line. I could hear it, the closer smile. We just need to talk about the future, about Seowon. Ji-woo looked at the phone. Then she looked at me, and I watched the last of the wet marble woman finish burning away, and what was left in the corner booth of my laundromat was pure, cold, patient steel. She'd figured out in half a second what it had taken them 2 weeks to learn. He wanted the license. If he wanted the license, he knew about the license. If he knew about the license, then the man on the phone weeping about how they'd framed her was the man who'd framed her. He'd just handed her the confession. Warm as a bath. Adrian, she said, and her voice was lovely, and it was a knife. I'd love to talk about the future. He wanted to meet at a members club up in the hills, the kind with no sign on the door and a wine list longer than my lease. And Ji-woo said yes to the meeting and no to the club. He picked a hotel tea room instead, marble and quiet, public enough that he couldn't do anything, and private enough that he'd think he could. She understood him better than he understood himself. He'd walk into a room she chose and never once wonder why she'd chosen it. I wired her before she went. Not a movie thing, just my phone in her bag on an open call to a second phone in my pocket, recording every second, because the whole point of the meeting. The only point was to get Adrian Coe to say the thing out loud. Don't get him to confess, I told her in the cab we couldn't afford. He won't confess. He's too good. Get him to want. Wanting is enough. If he asks for the license, he knew about the license. And a man who framed you for fraud can't have known about a secret asset unless he was already inside your grandfather's paper. The want is the confession. Let him hand it to you. I know how to sit across a table from a liar, she said, adjusting the collar of a blouse Mrs. Bake had pressed for her. I was engaged to one for 2 years. How do you feel? She looked out the window at the tower going by. Like myself, she said. For the first time in 2 weeks. Isn't that sad? I feel like myself walking into a room to be lied to. That's what he made me for. A beat. Let's go make him a widower of the version of me he thought he killed. Adrian was already seated when she walked in, and he did the whole performance, half rising, the wounded warmth, the hand pressed to his chest. He'd dressed down on purpose, soft sweater, no tie, a man who'd been up all night fighting for her. He was very good. I'll say it as many times as it takes, because the story doesn't work if you think he was a cartoon. He wasn't. He was the best liar I ever recorded, and I've recorded a lot. You look thin, he said, like it broke his heart. God, Ji-woo, where have you been? I had actual people looking. I was terrified you'd. He didn't finish it. Left the awful implication hanging, so she'd feel he'd worried about her doing something to herself. I couldn't stop them at the board. You have to believe that. My uncle moved before I could get ahead of it, but I've spent every day since finding the thread that clears you, and I found it. I found how they built the vendor scheme, and I can give it to the prosecutor. But I need you with me. I need us to walk in together. Together, she said. Soft, wounded, she was as good as he was. I sat in a cab down the hill, listening to 2 of the best liars in the country perform sincerity at each other, and I almost forgot which one was mine. There's a restructuring, Adrian said, easing into it, smooth as a man merging into traffic. A way to unfreeze your accounts and put the company back on its feet. And yes, some of it protects me too. I won't insult you by pretending it doesn't. We consolidate the assets, all of them, personal and corporate, under one clean vehicle. We hand the regulators a tidy story, and we walk out with our names back. Both of us. He slid the folder across the marble. It's just signatures. Boring signatures. My lawyers built it to make everything simple. There it was, all of them personal and corporate under one clean vehicle. Personal, he'd said personal. There was only one personal asset in the world worth building a vehicle around, and it wasn't her frozen checking account. You want everything in one place, Ji-woo said, turning pages she was pretending to read. Everything I own. Everything we can protect, including things that aren't the company's. Still soft. Still the grieving fiancé. Things that were only ever mine. A pause on the recording. Just a beat. But I heard it. And she heard it. The tiny hitch where a predator checks whether the prey knows what it's holding. Sweetheart, Adrian said gently, and I could hear the smile come back on. I don't know what you mean. I just want you safe. Sign the restructuring. Come home. Let me fix this. And then he made the mistake that ended him months before it looked like it ended him. And he made it because men like Adrian can't help themselves. They always reach for the leash, even when the animal's already following. He reached for Jaewon. And your brother, Adrian said. So warm, so caring, dropping it in like a kindness. How is he? I've been thinking about him. His treatment, that clinic. It's so expensive, and with your accounts frozen, it must be such a worry. A breath. Sign this, and it all goes away. You could have his protocol funded through the company by Friday, or he let it drift, delicate, monstrous. Well, I'd hate to think of him losing his ward over paperwork. You know how these clinics are the moment a payment slips? The threat sat on the marble table like an unpaid bill. In the cab, my hand tightened on the phone. Not because it scared me, because it was the last piece. He'd just, on a recording, on a clean open line, tied his restructuring to a threat against a sick child. That's not a divorce, that's a felony with a bow on it. Ji-woo let her hand shake. She's a genius, that woman. She let it shake exactly the right amount. And she looked up at him with exactly the right amount of fear. And she said, in a voice with a beautiful, believable crack in it, "Give me 2 days. I need 2 days to read it. Please, Adrian, 2 days." "Of course," he said, magnanimous now, the deal all but closed in his mind. 2 days. Take care of yourself. Eat something. He stood, and he did the worst thing of all. He came around the table, and he kissed the top of her head, the way you'd comfort someone. And I heard it happen, and I have never in my life wanted to walk up a hill so badly. She came back down to the cab and got in and closed the door and sat very still for a moment. Did you get it? She said. I got all of it. The personal slip, the transfer, the threat against Jaewon on tape with his own voice tying them together. I stopped the recording and saved it 3 places. He handed you a confession and a felony and thanked you for the tea. Good. Her voice was steady, then quieter. He kissed my head. I heard, like I was a child, like I was something he'd broken and was being gentle with. She looked at her own hands, the one she'd let shake. For 2 years I thought that gentleness was love. Couldn't tell the difference. That's the part I can't forgive. Not what he did, that I couldn't tell. You can tell now, I said. She looked at me. The steel came back up over whatever that had been. Yes, she said. Now I can tell. Let's put him in the ground he dug. They didn't wait 2 days. Predators never give you the time they promise. That's the whole reason to ask for it, to see if they'll break their own word. And Adrian broke his by the next afternoon because Adrian had a clock too now, and his was ticking against the same wall as ours. He couldn't wait, because a signature freely given is only clean if she's a person in good standing when she gives it. And every day she stayed free was a day she might figure out what she held. So the board moved to make sure she couldn't stay free, and they moved on 2 tracks at once, the way careful money always does, so that whichever one landed, they'd win. Track 1, a warrant. Somebody at the prosecutor's office, someone Sang-hyun owned, upgraded her indictment to an arrest warrant. Fugitive language, failure to appear, the works. A woman under arrest can't walk into a ministry ceremony and claim a license. A woman under arrest gets a court-appointed guardian for her financial affairs, and guess who'd volunteer to serve? Track 2, and this is the one that told me exactly how frightened they'd become. Incapacity. They filed a quiet petition suggesting Han Ji-woo was mentally unfit to manage her own assets. Unstable, a danger to herself. Look how she vanished. Look how she's living, hiding in a laundromat with a disgraced criminal. If a court declared her incompetent, her signature wouldn't even be needed. A guardian, a proxy, someone tasteful and concerned, could sign the transfer for her. They were building 2 roads to the same pen. And to make the incapacity story sing, they needed her desperate and erratic and cornered. So they went back to the softest place. The place Adrian had already found, and this time they didn't ask nicely. The clinic called. Not autopay this time, a person, apologetic and firm. There had been a review of the account, given the legal circumstances of the guarantor. They were no longer comfortable continuing the specialist protocol. They'd be moving Jaewon to a public ward at the end of the week. They were so sorry. They used the word unfortunately 4 times. The pressure had come down from somewhere. It always comes down from somewhere. And Ji-woo, who'd been still for 2 straight days, went gray when she took that call. Because they'd found the one lever that turned her back into a person. And they knew it. And they were leaning on it in front of the whole watching board, precisely to make her look like a woman coming apart. And Chae-rin, God help her, went on television again to seal it. She'd graduated from tearful friend to concerned public advocate. She sat on an afternoon program and she pressed a tissue to her lip and she said the most poisonous thing yet, the thing designed to lock the incapacity story shut. I just want her to get help, Chae-rin said, brimming. The Ji-woo I knew would never do these things. She's not well. Hiding, disappearing, whatever man she's fallen in with. Ji-woo, if you're watching, please. Turn yourself in, get help. We all just want you safe. She dabbed. It's what your grandfather would have wanted. I watched Ji-woo watch that. She's telling me to surrender and be declared insane, Ji-woo said flat. And she's using my dead grandfather's name to do it, on daytime television with a tissue. Yeah, I said. I was going to be gentle with her, Ji-woo said, at the end. Because we were 20 once, and she was funny once, and I thought there might have been 1 real year in there somewhere. She turned off the TV. I'm not going to be gentle with her. I didn't try to talk her out of it. Some people earn what's coming, and Chae-rin was building hers with both hands and a tissue. But the vice was real, and it was closing, and I did the math on the receipt roll calendar, and I didn't like the number. 9 days to the ceremony. Warrant on one side, incapacity petition on the other, a sick boy in the middle being used as a crank to turn her into whatever shape they needed. Quiet wasn't going to save us. Quiet had loaded the gun, but the vice didn't care about the gun. The vice just squeezed, so I did the 2 things you do when the walls come in. I moved the thing they were reaching for, and I got ready for the men they'd send. The first one I did with old Ma at 3 in the morning, and I'll keep it short because the boy deserves his privacy even in a story. We got Jaewon out, not dramatically. A doctor, an old one, retired now, who'd trained under a physician Ji-woo's grandfather, had funded through school 40 years ago. A debt so old everyone had forgotten it. But the doctor, because the small, brave people never forget. He agreed to take Jaewon and continue the protocol privately, quietly, in a facility 2 hours south under old Ma's family name. Funded on nothing but my word and the coming fortune, and the doctor's own stubborn honor. By the time the clinic's end of the week arrived to move Jaewon to a public ward and make Jiwoo watch, Jaewon wasn't there to move. He was safe, under a name that wasn't Han, being cared for by a man who owed a dead founder a 40-year debt and paid it to his grandson. I didn't tell Jiwoo the details. I told her 3 words. He's safe. Trust me. And she looked at me for a long moment and did the hardest thing that woman had done all week. Harder than the tea room, harder than the steps. She trusted me. Okay, she said, he's safe. And she let it go, the softest place, put it in my hands and let it go. And I understood that whatever this was between us had crossed a line neither of us was going to be able to walk back. Then I got ready for the men. Because when you move the lever out from under a machine like Adrian's, the machine doesn't stop. It just casts around for a new place to push. And the next softest thing, the next lever within reach, wasn't Jaewon anymore. It was a laundromat, and the people in it. They came on the 7th night, 3 of them, in the good suits that mean facilities. Not muscle, though they'd brought the muscle's shoulders. The one in front introduced himself as Mr. Song from Seowon Property Development, and he had a card and a smile and a folder of his own. And he stood in my laundromat among the humming dryers like he was already measuring it for demolition. Mr. Calder, he said, we're expanding the district portfolio. This block. We'd like to make you an offer on the lease. A generous one. He set the folder on my counter. Very generous. The kind of man in your position doesn't see twice. I'm not selling, I said, folding a towel, because I'd learned that trick from myself. Everyone sells, Mr. Song said, still pleasant. It's just a question of the number or... And here the smile stayed exactly where it was, while everything behind it changed, shift. The alternative. Buildings like this, old wiring, all these machines, the grease in a kitchen. Insurance is such a worry, and your staff. His eyes went, deliberate, to the kitchen pass-through, where Mrs. Bake had gone very still over her pot, and to the front where Tay stood frozen with a delivery crate in his arms. An old woman working nights, a minor is he, working a scooter with no proper papers. It would be a shame if the labor authorities took an interest, or if something happened late, the way things happen to 24-hour businesses in bad neighborhoods. And that's the moment. Every one of these stories has one. The moment the machine reaches past the target and puts its hand on someone small, someone who never asked to be in it. Because that's how machines like this have always worked. They find the weak and they squeeze until the strong give up to protect them. Mrs. Bake's hand was shaking on the ladle. Tay had gone white and his knuckles were bloodless on the crate. 17 years old and being told in a pleasant voice that men might come for him in the dark. I put the towel down. I didn't raise my voice. I want that on the record because I know how this genre goes and I didn't do the thing. I didn't have to. I'd spent 3 years being the most boring man in Uedo, and I'd forgotten, honestly, what it felt like to be the other thing. And it came back like a language you learn as a child. Mr. Song, I said, from facilities, sit down for 1 second. This is worth your time. He didn't sit, but he tilted his head, curious, because I'd changed and he'd felt it. I picked up my phone. You just walked into a 24-hour business on camera and made a threat against a minor employee and an elderly woman, tied to a lease you want, on behalf of a company under active regulatory query. There are 4 cameras in here. I own the footage. It uploaded to 3 places while you were talking, because I set it up that way 2 weeks ago when I noticed a black sedan that couldn't parallel park. I turned the phone so he could see the little red dot. Here's what you are now, Mr. Song. You came in here an enforcer. You're leaving a witness. Those are very different jobs with very different pensions, and the only choice you've got left is which one you'd like to be when the prosecutor watches this. Because a prosecutor is going to watch this, I promise you that. The smile finally moved. Just a flicker at the corner, the first honest thing on his face all night. You're bluffing, he said. But he'd lost the music. I'm the most careful man you'll ever threaten, I said. Ask your chairman. Ask Ko Sang-hyun what happens to the paper trail when he leans on someone who reads paper. Actually, and I smiled, and I felt it reach my eyes. And I watched him clock that too. Do ask him. Say the name Calder. Watch his face. Then decide whether the lease is worth your name in a file next to his. Something crossed Mr. Song's face when I said Calder. Some flicker of recognition, or maybe just the sound of a name his chairman never said out loud. He looked at me a second longer. Then he picked up his folder, told his shoulders it was time, and left without another word. And the pleasant menace went out the door with him. My laundromat was quiet, except for the machines and Mrs. Beck's ladle finally hitting the side of the pot. Tay let out a breath like he'd been holding it since birth. That, he said shakily, was the coolest and most terrifying thing I have ever seen in my life. Are we gonna die? Probably not you, I said. Go check on Mrs. Bake. He went, And Mrs. Bake, who I'd heard say maybe 4 sentences in 2 years, came out from the kitchen and stood in front of me and looked up, way up, and put her small shaking hand flat on my chest for 1 second. Once, and then swatted me with a dish towel and told me to eat something. I looked like a ghost, which I did, which I was. But I hadn't been for about 90 seconds, and it had felt like putting on a coat I thought I'd thrown away. Ji-woo had watched the whole thing from the back doorway. "You told him to say your name to Sang-hyun," she said. "Yeah, that's the opposite of hiding. You've been a ghost for 3 years and you just sent your name up the hill on purpose." She came closer. "Why?" "Because it's almost time," I said. "The vice means they're scared, and scared means the ceremony's the whole game now, and there's no version where I walk into that hall a ghost. If we're doing this, they're going to know exactly who read their pages. Might as well let the chairman spend a few sleepless nights on it first." I looked at her. Also, they threatened Mrs. Bake and a kid with a scooter jar. I found I had a limit. Turns out, it's right about there. She looked at me for a long moment, and then Han Ji-woo did something she hadn't done in the entire 2 weeks I'd known her. She reached out and, very briefly, straightened the collar of my terrible laundromat shirt, the way you'd fix something you'd decided to keep. And she said, "Don't die before the ceremony. I need you for the ceremony. Romantic. After the ceremony," she said, and let the sentence end there, deliberately, and walked back inside. And I stood in my quiet laundromat, feeling like the floor had moved in a direction floors don't usually go. 2 days left, and I still had to let her walk into the worst room of all. The forced signing happened the day before the ceremony, and it happened because we let it. That's the part I need you to understand, or the rest of it just looks like luck. Adrian's people delivered an ultimatum through the incapacity petition. Appear voluntarily to resolve the family and financial matters or be taken into custody and have it all resolved without her. He set the meeting at Seowon Tower itself, in a conference room off the executive floor, and he meant it as the kill. Sign the transfer freely, under the eyes of his lawyers and a compliant notary, and the license would move to the board's vehicle clean, legal on its face. The day before the ceremony that would have let her claim it, he'd close it with 12 hours to spare. We walked into it with our eyes open. Because a coerced signature is the single best piece of evidence a person can manufacture against the man holding the pen to their throat. If that person has already moved everything that matters out of reach and wired the room. Ji-woo went up into the tower she'd been thrown out of, in an elevator she used to own, wearing a wire under a blouse Mrs. Bake had pressed. And I sat 2 floors down in a supply corridor Unisong had badged me into, listening to every word, recording every second, with Park Seo-jin's private number already typed and waiting on my screen. They had it staged. Adrian, warm and grave, 2 lawyers, a notary who wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. And on the table, the transfer, the real one now, no more restructuring euphemism, a clean assignment of concession, no 7 from Han Ji-woo to a Seowon subsidiary for a consideration of $1 and family harmony. "You don't have to read it," Adrian said gently. "You know I built it to be fair?" "I want to read it," Ji-woo said, and her voice did the crack again, the beautiful, believable crack, a woman at the end of her rope. She turned the pages slowly. "And if I don't sign," Adrian sighed like it pained him, "then the warrant executes tonight. You're in custody by morning. The incapacity petition goes through because who fights it? And a guardian signs this anyway next week, and you're in a cell for it. And your brother," he said it so softly. "Well, there's no one to make the payments from a cell, Ji-woo. His protocol's already lapsed. Every day it stays lapsed. He loses ground he doesn't get back. You know that better than I do?" He slid the pen across the table. "Or you sign right now and I make a call, and his specialist is reinstated within the hour, and this all just ends. You go somewhere warm, you rest. You let me carry it." And this is where it would have destroyed her if we hadn't spent the week we spent. This is the moment they built the whole vice for. The moment where a woman signs away $3 trillion because a man she trusted is holding her sick brother over a fire. Except Jaewon wasn't over the fire. Jaewon was 2 hours south, under Old Ma's family name, in the care of a doctor paying off a 40-year debt. His protocol never lapsed a single day, safe, out of reach, off the board. Adrian was threatening her with a hostage he no longer had. He just didn't know it. He was pointing an empty gun at her and calling it mercy. And Ji-woo knew the gun was empty. So she looked at the man who'd framed her and dumped her and kissed her head like a child, and she let one tear go precisely. And she picked up the pen with a shaking hand, and she signed the transfer of the most valuable object in the country over to his shell company. For $1 and family harmony, freely, on camera, in front of a notary. She signed it because a signature obtained by threatening a hostage is void the second you can prove the threat, and worthless the second you can prove the hostage was already safe. and radioactive the second you can prove the man across the table knew the license existed, which he'd just spent 20 minutes proving on my recording in his own warm voice. She didn't give him $3 trillion. She gave him a felony notarized. There, she whispered. Broken. Perfect. It's done, please. Call the clinic, please. Of course, Adrian said. And he was so gentle, so victorious, so completely certain he'd won, that he made the call right there in front of her. To a clinic that no longer had her brother, to reinstate a protocol that had never stopped, and every word of that went onto my recording too. The whole architecture of the coercion, start to finish, sealed with a phone call. Up on the executive floor, Adrian Coe folded the signed transfer into his jacket like a man tucking away a winning hand, and told his lawyers it was finished, and poured himself something from the founder's decanter, and believed completely that he had just closed the greatest deal of his life 12 hours before the ceremony. 2 floors down, in a supply corridor, I stopped the recording and saved it to the 3 places, and looked at the little device that now held every letter of his triumph, which was every letter of his ruin. And I thought, he tucked the trap into his own jacket and thanked her for signing it. I texted Ji-woo 1 word as she rode the elevator down. Perfect, she texted back 4. He drank grandfather's brandy, then he'll choke on it. That should have been the whole plan. Load it quiet, spring it public at the ceremony, walk out with the tower, clean. Except that night, the machine finally read the 1 page it had never turned. It read me. Chae-rin did it. In the end, the same way she'd done everything out of the guilty need to be sure. She'd photographed my table 2 weeks earlier and handed Adrian $1 trillion by accident. Now nervous that Ji-woo had signed too easily, too calm at the end for a broken woman. She went back through her own photos looking for something to justify the itch in her gut, and in the corner of one blurry shot through my fogged window. Behind the license folder, there was a man's face, half lit by a dryer. She ran it. Chae-rin knew people who ran faces. And the name came back, and she brought it up the hill the next morning like a cat bringing a bird to the door, proud. Certain she'd found the thread that would let them tighten everything before the ceremony. He's nobody, she told Adrian and Sang-hyun in the founder's office. A laundromat owner. But look, he had a license once. Some kind of accountant. Calder, Reese Calder. He was disbarred years ago. Some data scandal. It's all. She got that far. She got exactly to the name. And Ko Sang-hyun, the careful one. The old one. The man who never raised his voice and never lost his color and had spent 30 years being the coldest thing in every room he entered, stood up from behind the founder's desk very slowly, and the blood went out of his face the way water goes out of a tub when the plug's pulled, all at once from the bottom. Because Sang-hyun was the only one in that room old enough to be afraid of the right thing. Say it again, he said. Reese Calder. He's just I know what he is. Sang-hyun's voice had gone somewhere thin. I spent 400 million making him not what he is. I pulled his license. I killed his career. I ended his marriage. I made him a ghost because he was the one man who read the vendor structure and wouldn't sign. And I was assured that he was finished, that he'd taken the settlement and disappeared. He put both hands flat on the desk. And you're telling me that the woman we framed using the same vendor structure has been living in the back room of Reese Calder's laundromat for 2 weeks. The office went very quiet. Adrian, slower than his uncle, felt the cold arrive. So he's a disgraced accountant in a laundromat. So what? He's got nothing. You said you took everything. I took everything except the thing he'd already hidden, Sang-hyun said, and now his voice had real fear in it. The fear of a man who'd built a house and just heard the foundation crack. You don't understand what that man is. He doesn't forget, and he doesn't forgive, and he keeps records the way other men breathe. If he kept even 1 file from the original audit, 1, then everything we just did to Han Ji-woo isn't a fraud she can't prove. It's a fraud he watched us use his own murder weapon on someone else, and we handed him the victim. He looked at the transfer Adrian had been so proud of, sitting on the desk. And you spent yesterday getting a coerced signature, on camera, in a room he could have wired, tying us to the license and the boy and all of it. If he has that recording, he doesn't know I recorded. Adrian started. He records everything, Sang-hyun said. That's the whole reason he's dangerous. That's the whole reason I buried him. He sat back down, heavily. An old man watching the shape of his own ending walk toward him, out of a place he thought he'd sealed. Finish him, tonight. The laundromat, the files, the woman, all of it. Before the ceremony. I don't care how. But it was already the night before the ceremony, and I'd stopped being reachable that afternoon, and so had Ji-woo, and so had the box, and so had every copy of everything. Because I'd known this hour was coming from the moment I put my name in Mr. Song's ear on purpose. You send your name up the hill for exactly one reason. To make the careful man panic on your schedule instead of his. Sang-hyun sent his people to a dark laundromat and found Mrs. Baek's cold pot and Tae's empty jar, and a note taped to the door in my handwriting that said, simply, closed for the ceremony, R. Calder, and 2 miles away. In a small office Pak Seo-jin had opened for me at 9 at night, against every rule of her career. I laid the last of it out, and I made the call I'd been waiting 3 years to have a reason to make. Director Pak, I said, bring the commission to the Concession 7 ceremony tomorrow. Bring the prosecutor's office, the ones who aren't owned, and I'll tell you which ones those are because I kept a list. Everything you've been chasing on Seowon, the vendors, the fraud, the woman they framed, it all lands in that hall at once, in public, on the record, in front of the ministry and the cameras. I looked at the box and the ledger and the recording, 3 years and 2 weeks of patience, sitting on a borrowed desk. I'll bring 10 years. You bring the handcuffs. There was a pause on the line. Pak Seo-jin had waited a long time too. Reese, she said, is it real this time? Is it enough? It's enough, I said. It was always enough. I just needed someone standing in the wreckage next to me who they couldn't buy or bury. I found her. She's holding the other half. Here's what we brought to the ceremony, laid out on that borrowed desk the night before. 3 streams about to meet in one hall. First was mine, the box from under the floor, 3 years of originals, the real vendor registrations, the undoctored access logs with the timestamps that prove the doctoring, the recording of a $400 million lunch where a man told a young auditor to be careful where he put his signature. The murder weapon with Sang-hyun's prints on it, kept in the dark by the one victim careful enough to keep it. The second was hers, or rather her grandfather's, and this was the piece I hadn't known about until old Ma brought a second envelope that night, the last of the old man's foresight. Han Du-seok, who trusted his board about as far as he could throw the tower, hadn't just hidden the license. He'd left a ledger with his own notary, sealed, with a single instruction. If Ji-woo is ever charged with a crime against Seowon, publish it. A dead man's switch. 2 years cold. Inside in the old man's hard hand was his own private record of the board's schemes, dates and names and the vendor structure he'd watched them build and said nothing about. Because he was waiting, the way I was waiting. The way we're all always waiting for the moment the machine runs where the whole world can see it. The old man had been building the same trap from the other end. He'd just died before he could spring it, and left the trigger to his granddaughter, and a stranger who read pages. The forgery pattern matched. That was the thing that turned 2 separate scandals into one noose. The vendor structure that killed me 3 years ago. The vendor structure that framed Ji-woo 2 weeks ago. The ledger the old man kept. All the same hand. The same agent, the same crooked signature work. The same mail drop address. One machine, one operator. Sang-hyun's top to bottom, with Adrian's fingerprints layered on the recent coat. And the third stream was the one Adrian was carrying in his own jacket without knowing it. The coerced transfer and the recording of the coercion. His warm voice tying the license to the hostage to the felony, notarized, sealed, radioactive. Ji-woo stood over the desk and looked at all 3 streams laid out and about to meet, and she'd gone all the way to steal now. No cracks left. The woman the profiles had feared and never once actually seen. We don't clear my name, she said. Again, the way she'd said it 2 weeks ago at a folding table, except now it was a plan instead of a wish. We don't defend, we activate. Say the rest. The ceremony re-registers the concession. They think it's their coronation. They think the license lapses to their tender. They think they already have my signature transferring it away. So we let them think it right up until the ministry calls the concession. And then I don't hide it, and I don't fight over it. Her eyes had a cold light in them I'd come to recognize, the old man's light. I claim it in my own name, in front of the state, the press, and every predator who threw me in the rain. I turn the trillion on with my own hand in the last hour of the clock, in their own hall. And everything you're holding goes up on the screen behind me while I do it. They'll try to stop it. The warrant, the incapacity petition. Let them try to arrest me for fraud, Ji-woo said. In the same 10 minutes you prove to the same regulators that they committed the fraud. Let them try to declare me incompetent while I'm executing a flawless claim on a $3 trillion asset in front of the ministry. Let them reach for every weapon they built and find out every one of them is pointed backward. She straightened, and I swear the temperature in that borrowed office dropped. My grandfather said, never negotiate to survive. Negotiate to own the table. Tomorrow I'm not surviving. Tomorrow I'm taking the table, the hall, and everyone dumb enough to still be sitting at it. Outside, the city did its indifferent, glowing thing. 40 floors of confident blue telling everyone a clean story about order restored and a thief brought low. I looked at the receipt roll calendar one last time and crossed off the second to last square. The ceremony was in the morning. The clock had 6 hours left on it. And for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't a ghost waiting in the dark. I was a man with a box, standing next to a woman with a crown, about to walk through the front door of the building that erased us both. The ceremony hall took up the whole second floor of Seowon Tower, all glass and pale stone, 300 chairs, and a stage and a ministry seal on a blue backdrop, and a bank of cameras at the rear because a state concession worth this much doesn't get re-registered in the dark. It was the most public room in the country that morning. That was the whole reason we'd let the clock drive us straight into it. Adrian ran it like a coronation, because in his mind that's what it was. He worked the room in a suit that cost a year of my laundromat, shaking hands, grave and gracious, the young chairman restoring order after a painful scandal. Sang-hyun sat in the front row with the ministry officials, statesmen still. And Chae-rin was on Adrian's arm in white. 3 tasteful weeks having done their work. Already photographed, already the next Mrs. Ko in everyone's mind. Radiant with a victory she thought was hers. They had her signature folded in Adrian's breast pocket. They had a warrant they could execute the second she showed her face. They had an incapacity petition primed. They had, they believed, every road covered. At 9:50, with the ministry official clearing his throat to open the proceedings, the doors at the back of the hall opened, and Han Ji-woo walked in. She wasn't in white or armor or anything a chairwoman would wear. She was in my coat, the not nice one, the one I'd put over her shoulders in the rain, buttoned to the throat. And she walked down the center aisle of the tower she'd been dragged out of 2 weeks earlier at a pace that made 300 people stop breathing. Behind her came old Ma in his 15-year-old suit, Yoona Song, terrified and unbowed, Pak Seo-jin with 2 investigators. A prosecutor named Han, no relation. The universe has a sense of humor with a folder of his own, and me, at the back, carrying a box. Hall did the thing a trading floor does when a number comes in wrong. A half-second of total silence, then everyone moving at once. Adrian recovered first, because performing was the thing he was best at. Ji-woo. He smiled, spread his hands, turned it into theater for the cameras. You came. I'm glad. Officers, a small gesture toward the security at the walls. There's a warrant, but let's do this with dignity. She's not well. Let's get her some hell. Minister, Ji-woo said. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The whole room was straining toward her. She walked to the podium, and she set the gray government folder down on it next to the ministry's own seal, and she looked at the official, not at Adrian, never once at Adrian. I'm Han Ji-woo. I'm the registered holder of concession number 7. I'm here within the 90-day window my grandfather's grant requires to activate it in person as the law provides. A pause. Before I do, this hall should probably see who's been trying to make sure I couldn't. She's under indictment, one of Sang-hyun's ministry men said quickly. This is highly irregular. She has no standing to. Let's talk about the indictment, Ji-woo said. Reese, and I set the box on the stage, and we turned on the screens. And we buried them. We'd loaded it to go fast because the audience profile of a room full of regulators and cameras is the same as any other audience. You lose them if you crawl. And we did not crawl. The first thing on the screen was 2 signatures, side by side, blown up 10 feet tall. Her real one with the chipped letter. The one on her confession with the identical chip. Pixel for pixel. Person cannot sign their name the same way twice, I said into a microphone Pack had made sure was live. This isn't a signature. It's a photocopy cut from a genuine filing and pasted onto a forged confession. Here's the genuine filing it was cut from. Next slide. The original Yoona had smuggled out of the basement. The gap matched the paste like a tooth to a socket. The room made a sound. Now the money. I didn't stop. Payment dates before their own approval dates. The 5-day impossibility, up on the wall in the ministry's own light. 6 shell vendors, consecutive registration numbers, born the same afternoon, same mail drop, same incorporation agent. These aren't companies. They're stage sets. 4.2 billion ran through cardboard and got painted onto Han Ji-woo, and it was painted by someone who'd done it before. Slide. 3 years ago. The same agent. The same mail drop. The same crooked hand. My own old file, the one that ended me, next to the one that ended her, the fingerprints identical. One machine built both frames. I know because I'm the auditor who read this machine 3 years ago and refused to sign for it. And I'm the reason a man in this room spent 400 million making me disappear. Sang-hyun didn't move. But the color went out of his face the way it goes out of concrete when the rain finally reaches the rebar, from the inside, structural. And in case anyone thinks a disgraced accountant and a ruined woman cooked this up between them, Ji-woo said, my grandfather kept his own record. The dead man's ledger went up. Han Du-seok's hard old hand, 2 years of dated observations of his own board schemes, sealed with a notary the day he made it, released automatically the moment they charged his granddaughter. The founder testifying from the grave, in his own writing, that the machine was Sang-hyun's and had always been Sang-hyun's. He knew, Ji-woo said, and her voice didn't shake at all. He watched them build it, and he left me the map. He trusted his board so little he wrote their confession for them and left it in a drawer. The prosecutor named Han was on his feet now. So were the cameras, all of them. In a way cameras get when they know the clip they're capturing is the one that runs for a year. And Adrian, God bless the confidence of a truly stupid, clever man, played his last card, because he still thought he had one. "This is a performance," he said, loud, to the room, to the cameras. "It's theater." Whatever she claims, the fact remains. Han Ji-woo transferred Concession 7, freely, to a Seowan subsidiary yesterday, of her own will before a notary. "I have the document." He pulled it from his breast pocket and held it up like a shield. "She has no standing to activate anything." She signed it away. "I did sign it," Ji-woo said. The room turned. "Play it," she said, and I played the recording. Adrian's own voice filled the hall he'd meant to be crowned in, warm as a bath. "Then the warrant executes tonight. You're in custody by morning. And your brother, well, there's no one to make the payments from a cell. Or you sign right now, and his specialist is reinstated within the hour. The threat, the hostage, the license, the coercion, all of it in his own gracious, murdering voice. Sealed with the phone call he'd made so proudly to reinstate the care of a boy who was already 2 hours south and had never lost a day of it. "A signature obtained by threatening a hostage is void," I said, into the silence. "Signature obtained by threatening a hostage who is already safe, beyond the reach of the man making the threat, is not just void. It's a recording of extortion, tying Adrian Ko personally to knowledge of the license, to the fraud that framed her, and to a felony against a sick child. He didn't get her to sign away $3 trillion yesterday." I looked at Adrian, at the document still raised in his hand like a shield that had turned to glass. He got her to record him confessing. She handed him a pen. He handed her his own throat. The document came down slowly. Adrian looked at it in his own hand, the winning card he'd tucked into his jacket so proudly, and I watched the exact second he understood it had been the trap the whole time, and his smile stayed bolted where it was while the man behind it quietly stopped existing. The fraud on the screens kept scrolling. That was the thing about doing it in front of the ministry. Once the first thread pulled, the whole decade came with it, dated line after dated line. So many of them they stopped reading like crimes and started reading like a wall of it. 10 years of the machine laid end to end until the numbers dissolved into a dark you couldn't see the bottom of. The prosecutor didn't have to build a case. We delivered it assembled. He just had to start reading names. Han Ji-woo's indictment is based entirely on the fabricated evidence you've just watched fall apart, the prosecutor said, and his voice was doing something careful. A man who could feel his own career turning a corner in real time. "As of this moment, I'm withdrawing it, and I'm placing," he checked his folder, "Adrian Ko and Ko Sang-hyun under arrest here. And I'd advise the board members whose names are on that screen to remain seated. One more thing before you take them," Ji-woo said, Minister. "My standing is restored. The indictment is withdrawn, and I'm the registered holder in my window in person." She opened the gray folder on the podium. "I'm activating concession number 7, now in my own name." The ministry official looked at his own clock, looked at the folder, looked at 300 witnesses and 40 cameras and a decade of fraud glowing on the wall behind a woman in a laundromat owner's coat. And he did the only thing a man in that chair could do with the whole world watching and the law suddenly, cleanly on her side. He stamped it. At 9:58, with 2 hours left on a 90-day clock her grandfather had set 2 years before he died, Han Ji-woo turned on $3 trillion with her own hand in the tower that had thrown her into the rain, in front of the men who'd done the throwing. Somewhere in the back of the hall, a financial reporter said out loud, not meaning to, "Oh my God." And the Seowan ticker on the lobby screens downstairs started falling down the stairs, and it did not stop for a long time. After that, it took about 11 minutes, and it happened in the order. These things always happen, which is weakest screw first. Yoon Jae-hyuk, the CFO, broke before the prosecutor even reached him. He stood up on his own, both hands visible, and started talking. Fast. The way a man talks when he's decided the only door left is the one marked cooperation. "I have records," he said. "I have everything." It was the chairman's structure. "I only signed what I was told. I can give you the offshore accounts. I can give you the second set of books. I want a deal. I want it now, on the record. I'll give you all of it." And he gave them all of it right there, in front of the cameras, the whole architecture of the machine. Because the machine had only ever held together on the belief that it would never be seen, and it had just been seen by everyone. By then the market was doing the arithmetic too, and the market is faster than any prosecutor. Down in the lobby, the Seowan ticker had gone from falling downstairs to falling down an elevator shaft. 9%, then 20, Then a number the exchange slapped a halt on because there's a speed past which they stop letting a company die in public. Every analyst who'd upgraded the stock 2 weeks ago on Thief in Handcuffs, Handsome Man, Restoring Order, was now live on their own feed, explaining with the specific sweat of people revising a call they'd staked their name on that actually the handsome man was the thief. The bump they'd all taken for the funeral was being repossessed with interest. And the room emptied around Adrian the way water empties around a drain, which is the part the cameras loved most. 2 board members who hadn't been named, who'd spent the whole morning seated behind him in a show of unity, stood up and physically changed seats on camera. Crossing to the far side of the aisle like fraud was a draft they could step out of. The ministry men who'd been sitting with Sang-hyun discovered urgent business in their own folders. A lawmaker who'd sent flowers to the engagement had his office disavow Adrian before the man was even in the car. That's how backers work. They don't turn on you slowly. They were never with you, they were with the winning, and the instant the winning walked to the other side of the room, so did they. Adrian got to kneel there and watch his entire base relocate to the prosecution's aisle in under a minute, still holding a document that had turned to glass. Chae-rin came apart next, and hers was the one I'd felt something close to pity about, right up until it happened. Her metadata did it. That first photo she'd taken through my window, the one that handed Adrian the license by accident. It had a timestamp and a location, and it lived in a text thread to Adrian that Yun's records opened like a can. Her whole architecture, the tearful friend, the concerned advocate, the tissue, the "it's what your grandfather would have wanted," all of it timestamped against messages where she'd called Ji-woo the corpse and asked Adrian when she got the chairwoman's office. It went up on the screen with everything else. She came apart on camera for the second time that month, and this time, it was real. And that was the whole truth of Chae-rin in one frame. The only honest crying she ever did was for herself. The cameras that had believed her tears 2 weeks ago recorded these ones too, and nobody in that hall or watching it moved to hand her a tissue. And then she did the last Chae-rin thing, the one that told you everything about the friendship Ji-woo had spent 2 weeks mourning. Cornered, unmasked, finished, she turned on Adrian to save herself. It was him, she said, wild, to the prosecutor, to the cameras, to anyone still pointed at her. It was all him and his uncle. I only did what Adrian told me. I have messages. I'll give you all of it. He promised me She stopped. Even Chae-rin heard how that sentence ended. He promised me the chair. He promised me her seat. There's no way to finish it that doesn't finish you. She'd helped bury the one person who ever called her a friend, and at the first ounce of real pressure, she sold the man she'd done it for. Fast and cheap and on camera. And the ugliest part was that it was the most honest she'd been the entire time. Adrian looked up at her from his knees, and whatever the two of them had been to each other died right there on the ministry's pale stone. And neither of them had anything left to mourn it with. And Adrian knelt. I don't think he decided to. I think his legs did it, the way mine had folded in the bank when I read the header. He went down in front of the podium, in his year of my laundromat suit, in front of the ministry and the cameras and the woman in my coat. And for once in his life, there was nothing performed about him, because he'd finally understood the size of what he was losing, and worse. The size of what he'd thrown away to lose it. Ji-woo, her name came out of him wrecked. Ji-woo, please, I loved you. Some of it was real. You have to. He reached for the oldest lie, and even wrecked he reached for a lie, because it was the only language he had. We can still, you have everything now. You don't need to do this. We could. You framed me for 4 billion, Ji-woo said. Quiet. She'd come around the podium, and she stood over him. And she wasn't cold now. Cold was for strangers. This was something older and worse. This was a person looking at the thing that had worn a friend's face for 2 years. You dumped me in the rain and toasted it with good coffee. You held my sick brother over a fire to make me sign. And you did all of it. And here, finally, she almost laughed. And it was the most frightening sound I'd heard her make for a company. For the loud thing. You had $3 trillion in front of you the whole time, in the woman you were marrying, and you never turned the page to see it because you never once, in 2 years, actually looked at me. You sold $1 trillion for a tower, Adrian, and you didn't even know you were selling it. You just thought you were killing me. She crouched, so she was level with him, and she said the last of it almost gently. Get up off my grandfather's floor. You don't get to kneel here. Kneeling is for people who understood what they had. They took him then. They took him and they took Chae-rin and they took the board members whose names were on the wall. Out through the same lobby they'd marched Ji-woo through 2 weeks before. Except this time there were 40 cameras and the whole country watching. And the story that had convicted her in 19 languages reversed itself in an afternoon, which is a thing stories do when the pages finally get read. Sang-hyun was last. He didn't struggle. He was too old and too careful for that. And as they walked him past the stage, he stopped just for a second in front of me. and looked at me with an expression I'd waited 3 years to see, and found, when I finally saw it, that I didn't need the way I'd thought I would. "I made you nothing," he said. "Not a question." An old man trying to understand the arithmetic that had beaten him. "You did," I said. "You took the license, the work, the marriage, all of it, and you made me a ghost in a laundromat. And then you stopped watching, because nobody watches a ghost." I looked at him, the man who'd bought a fish lunch and my whole life with it. "That was the mistake. Not that you made me nothing, that you believed nothing couldn't hurt you. I read every page you ever forged, Chairman. I just did it from a laundromat where you'd stopped looking." They walked him out. He went the color of the concrete his tower was poured from, and he didn't say anything else. And the last I saw of Ko Song-hyun, he was getting into a car with his hands where a man's hands go when the arithmetic finally comes out against him. And then the hall was loud. Cameras and questions and the ministry trying to restore order. And through all of it, a door at the side opened and a kid of 21 came through it too fast, pale and thin and grinning like the sun. Old Ma's steadying hand on his shoulder. "Nuna, Jaewon. Out of the facility 2 hours south, healthy enough to travel, protocol never once broken." Brought up that morning because his sister had told Old Ma there was exactly one person she wanted in the room when it was over. And it wasn't a regulator, and it wasn't a camera. Jai-woo turned at the sound of that word, Nuna, older sister, and for the first time in the entire 2 weeks I'd known her. In front of 300 people and the whole watching country, Han Ji-woo's face broke all the way open. And she crossed that stage and caught her brother and held on to him like the $1 trillion was the small thing. Because to her it always had been, and I stood off to the side with an empty box, having finally set down the thing I'd carried for 3 years and watched the coldest woman in the district come home. The story reversed the way stories do once the pages get read, which is all at once and with no apology to the people it convicted. By that night, thief chairwoman was framed heiress in the same 19 languages. And the clip that ran, the one that ran for a year, wasn't the rain on the steps. It was a woman in a plain coat setting a gray folder on a podium and saying, "Let's talk about the indictment." And a man in an expensive suit slowly lowering a document that had turned to glass in his hand. The good coat guy who'd filmed her in the rain and laughed, the one I'd promised myself would quietly delete his clip in about 10 weeks. Deleted it in about 10 hours, because that's how long it took the internet to decide he'd been laughing at a woman getting robbed. I never learned his name. I hope the arithmetic keeps him up. And Adrian got the loud things in the end, which is the joke the old man would have loved most. He got the tower, in a way, a cell with a view of it while the trial ran. He got his name in the papers he'd always wanted it in, printed under a different word. He got everything he'd traded $3 trillion for, and he got to keep it for 15 to 20 years. And he ended exactly where her grandfather had promised in an envelope 2 years cold. Worse off than the woman he'd thrown in the rain had ever been. She'd been thrown down with a crown in her pocket. He'd built his whole future on a tower he never actually owned and a fortune he never once bothered to read about. The Seowon board that remained, the clean ones, the ones whose names hadn't been on the wall, elected Han Ji-woo chairwoman by the end of the week, which was a formality because she already owned the only thing that mattered, and everyone knew it. She put Yoona Song on the executive floor, out of the basement for good. She kept Pak Seo-jin's number, and she made sure the promotion Pak had lost years ago for reading my file instead of signing the lie about it. Came back to her with interest and an apology in writing. Small, brave people, paid at last. She did not, in the end, keep the tower. That surprised people. It didn't surprise me. She installed a clean board, handed them the operating company, kept the concession in her own name, and a controlling stake in a folder. And about a month after the ceremony, on a gray morning, she loaded that folder and a bag into the back of my laundromat van. The one old Ma drives now because a man needs something to steer. Mrs. Bake pressed food on us for the road, too much of it, and swatted me with the dish towel one last time and told me I still looked like a ghost, which I've decided is just how she says goodbye. Tay made me promise to pay back the scooter jar double, and I did, and then I paid it back 100 times over because it turns out I could. And he bought a scooter that doesn't run on zip ties and optimism and immediately crashed it, and that's a different story. We drove up the coast. 2 hours, then 3. Sokcho, where the gray, worthless-looking land sat that the whole modern world was about to need. Where the old man had seen it all coming 15 years early. There's a noodle shop up there, right on the water. No sign worth mentioning the kind of place that's been run by the same family so long. The recipe is just muscle memory now. We got there at dawn. The sea was going from black to the color it goes. Ji-woo put the folder on the table between us. The controlling stake. The trillion, more or less, sitting in a manila fold next to the soy sauce. She didn't open it. "You're not going to open it?" I said. "It'll say the same thing whether I open it or not," she said. "I know what's in it. I spent 2 weeks and my whole family's history learning what's in it. She looked out at the water. The steam from the kitchen was already fogging the window beside us, the way it fogs in a laundromat, the way I'd come to associate with the only warm rooms I knew. My grandfather left me the quiet thing. Everyone spent this whole story fighting over the loud thing. The tower, the name, the trillion, and the quiet thing was never the license. She turned the folder a quarter turn on the table. Idle. Done with it. It was that a stranger put a coat on me in the rain and didn't ask for anything. And a scooter kid gave me his repair jar. And a woman who never speaks said, "Sick children come first." And a driver kept a letter for 2 years. That's the quiet thing. That's what he actually left me. The license was just how I found out who'd show up. A bowl came down in front of each of us. The good noodles, nobody in that shop had any idea who she was, which was the entire point of Sokcho. "The trillion can wait," Jiwoo said, and picked up her spoon. "The soup can't." I looked at the woman across the table, the one I'd found on wet marble pricing me for a threat, who'd walked into the tower that erased her and turned on $3 trillion in a borrowed coat, and then handed the tower away and kept the coat. The steam climbed the window between us and the sea and blurred the whole gray coast into something warmer than it had any right to be. "Both true, you know," I said. "You keeping me around? It's arithmetic and it's the other thing. Both true." "I know," she said. And under the table, without looking at me, without any performance in it at all, Han Ji-woo put her hand over mine and left it there. And outside the window, the sun finally cleared the water, and neither of us reached for the folder, and the soup was very good. And for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't reading the pages. I was just warm.